Hey everyone, welcome back to Nibiru Wavelengths, the Nibiru Native podcast. Here with us today, we got Eric Pinos. He's our head of ecosystem at Nibiru, and today we're going to chat more general AI news and just the latest that we've been seeing. This is more for personal curiosity and not necessarily anything that Nibiru is sort of pushing along. But without any further ado, Eric, do you want to just do a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Eric. I'm the head of ecosystem. So I've been working closely with our team and all of our partners to get everyone onboarded, right? Any dApps I want to build in our ecosystem, getting them set up with all of the resources they need, intros to other partners, intros for their fundraise. We do like UI feedback, developer testing, like quality assurance, anything these projects need to succeed. And then working with each other because our ecosystem is very focused on DeFi and on structured products and creating vaults that let you leverage the strengths of each individual dApp together into like these new financial instruments. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen, and therefore a lot of like conversations. We set up group chats, we do biweekly calls, and just support the projects that way.
Yeah, and then when we think about AI, and I know you've had an interest going back for some time. I don't know if you had an interest going back to your days in MIT, but you want to talk a bit about that? I know you went to like some meetups, throughout the boom that we saw earlier this year for AI agents in crypto, and you tinkered around with trying different models. So it would be helpful just to have a bit of understanding that for the audience.
Yeah, I did. So I was at MIT undergrad from 2013 to 2017, and there was a lot of AI stuff happening. MIT CSAIL, which is the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. There were classes. I took some CS classes and some AI classes. And I think that there was GPT-2 that kind of came out shortly after. And so because I was like exposed to that whole environment, a lot of it was AI putting it into like robots, so like physical bodies, which was really cool. And then using that for like enterprise purposes or like search and rescue purposes. But I think that like this general AI thing, they didn't really come around until GPT, and then OpenAI formed, and then kind of was the one leading that research. I was using GPT-2 in I think 2020 to like automate marketing because I was helping a nonprofit, right? I was running the Blockchain Education Network, and so it was like it's very difficult to get volunteers for a nonprofit. So it's like, well, this should just be run entirely by robots. And there was the promise from GPT-2 that like, oh, this can create things like actually like natural language, make it sound like normal, like a person's writing it. But there was no like interface like ChatGPT. It was all through APIs. And so you had to like know how to use it and then integrate it into your workflow that way. I mean, now there's all sorts of like no code tools for people to just use, right? Like for non-technical people to be able to like leverage these AI models, which I think is really cool. And it has shown like how much more accessible it is now for people to use AI like in their lives.
Yeah, no, it's been, I guess you weren't in the cohort where new generation are just using it for all their homework assignments, But I think back in the day, what I forgot about was Wolfram Alpha. Like, remember when you could put your math problems in there? I think that was a bit of AI based, like one of the first practical applications of it, where you can, maybe it was like RAG based or I don't know, was it reasoning? Like, I don't quite get what the model setup was.
It definitely had NLP because you could tell it your problem like a person, like just like, hey, what is this issue? Like, how do I do this calculation? I need to understand. And then it could like parse that and then convert that into the problem that you're actually trying to solve and then give you the answer. So I think that's another big part of it, because it's like there are some like AI tools that you still have to present the problem in a certain way. Otherwise, it's not going to know. And then that's limiting because you want to be able to just talk to it, because sometimes you don't even know what the problem is that you're trying to articulate, but then it can like assess that from, right? Like it'll parse what you're saying and then give you the appropriate response.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I think we're just going to tick through a couple just trends that we're sort of seeing. I think at the end, we could just go through some sort of recent news that we find exciting and just provide our thoughts. But, having been at a recent AI conference, one thing that I sort of noted is it sort of seems like software and AI are melding together. And I think you can see that's pretty much the case if you look at some of the VC writings that are coming out, where, VCs tend to hype things up, but like, it's basically just an extrapolation on software. And an example of that is just a lot of the software enterprises or even hardware are all creating their own AI strategy angle. So when you see like the likes of Dell, IBM and HP, creating hardware that would house NVIDIA GPUs that can cater specifically towards AI developers and then allow them to create basically be the compute that can plug into their computer and allow you to run a local host sort of deployment on your computer itself seems pretty exciting. But, what I found interesting was there's this whole market of, I'm going to build a server for a large institution, and that institution is highly worried about privacy and making sure cost efficiency. And those guys, it actually costs more money to them rather than going to, a cloud-based solution like Anthropic, Claude, GPT, and then continuously prompting. The fees there would be quite substantial. So instead, you can run an on-prem model, put that in a data center, and then run an open source model there, or a model that you custom design. And then you are able to control your data. And I think a good example of this is like Disney, where Disney has a bunch of intellectual property associated with all their media assets. If they put it in a public forum, people can probably recreate things that look like Disney, similar to the Ghibli-fi sort of moment we saw in GP 4.0. So of course, those people are very cognizant about data loss. So those people will want their own in-house solution. And then people are, that's basically being added on to folks that would normally just build servers on other people's behalf. And then people that are building data centers are like, okay, where there's this huge end market of people that want AI solutions, so we'll go and build data centers. So I think that is a slight focus in the market, but something that I also just didn't realize the scale of is just like everything building around these sort of AI enterprise solutions that are coming online. I don't know if you've seen anything related to that in your own research or interactions.
Well, I think it's interesting that it's very primed for that because the models are open source. And so when you have that, you open up the door for all of these enterprises to come in and then to just build their own version of it, or to utilizing that open source. I mean, it's similar to Linux, right? Linux came out as an open source thing. Chromium was open source, but we don't use Chromium browser, right? We use a lot of different Chrome and Brave and all these browsers that were created by companies that then run on Chromium, right? So I think, at the end of the day, we all end up using the same models, but the flavors or the packages that they come in will be different. And I think that, it makes sense for enterprises that they want their own solution because, they save on and then also they reduce the chances of their data leaking. It's kind of a similar thing with blockchain, right? That one of the whole theses of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance or Consensus's enterprise arm was people aren't going to want to, we're trying to convince people to deploy on Ethereum, but they don't want to make all their data public. And so that's where you end up with private blockchains or permission ledgers. And so we were kind of seeing the same thing. Yeah, I mean, every time there's a new technology, you don't really want to use the public version of it as a company. You want to set up your own version. And then if you're offering that to consumers, that's even better because now the consumers are interacting with your specialized model or your specialized data set that they can only get if they go to you. You're kind of the gatekeeper there.
I think the name of the game here is the ease in which a user can onboard, an enterprise can onboard, right? Because let's say I already pay for Microsoft and that Microsoft has the close partnership with OpenAI and GPT. Or if I am using the Google Suite, you simply just turn on the Gemini toggle, and they used to charge money on a per user basis, but if they just turned that off. So now you can previously we had to pay for Otter AI, the note-taking app. But then now if you just have a Google Meets app, you could just turn on Gemini and then it'll take the transcript and send you the email right after. And that's way more integrated. So there's a sub point here in the sense that there's a lot of these individual AI apps that were developed over the years, which will probably get steamrolled by these larger bases. But then it's also going back to figure out okay, if we do have enterprises that are more concerned about privacy, is there a solution that they could get through Google or Microsoft that would maybe allow them to use the closed source model, but themselves? Is that possible? Or is that too high risk? So then they're going to maybe go with someone like Anthropic, who's more safety focused as their angle, or go to Facebook, use the open source Llama model, or build a model themselves using some toolkit that a lot of new startups are trying to provide them.
Yeah. Didn't Anthropic, they partnered with Apple, right, on Xcode? And so it's
Yeah,
going to be
Apple's
available
been
there.
getting a lot of flack on their AI. Like Apple had Siri, like they should have taken this AI market years ago. It's funny if you watch the interviews. I think they know that's the case, but they're like, oh, it's coming. But if Apple, I think they're putting it into their code editor. So Apple, it's almost like Microsoft, but with Apple computers. And then instead, they know Anthropic and Claude generates the best coding output, so they'll still use it. And I think they also have a partnership with OpenAI, though. So I don't know if they use OpenAI for general use cases, Anthropic for coding. But if they use it in their devices, I'm not sure if they're using GPT or Claude, because Claude will obviously not perform as well, I think, on general purpose consumer sort of dApps, but maybe it will be fine, like being exchanged with Siri. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's funny that like Apple has been the most open about this because they integrated ChatGPT into Siri, right? Now integrating Claude into, or Anthropic into Xcode. I guess we'll see, like maybe they're just collecting enough data and use case to then eventually come out with, Apple AI or whatever, just like they did with Google Maps, eventually creating Apple Maps, right? They let the third party tool be a part of the core set. And then if it gets enough demand, then they launch their own version of it. I was kind of expecting the same from Amazon because, with Alexa, I considered Alexa being more, I always found Alexa like more comprehensive than Siri in terms of like what it can like respond with. Siri has access to more data, but I think Alexa just like knew more, or at least was integrated into like smart home stuff. So it felt like a more like, integrated experience to be like, okay, turn my lights on, do this, do that. But that's still, now compared to like what AI can do, like it just feels very basic, like, and you have to structure your prompts in like certain ways. Otherwise, it just won't understand. So I'm surprised that like Amazon hasn't done anything with that regard. I'm like,
well, one thing I didn't even realize was Amazon has their own model called Bedrock. Like I didn't know this existed. It didn't even come up in the news, but it's there. I think I had talked to someone who had worked at AWS, and then they sell the AWS like cloud suite alongside their Bedrock model. So they're trying to get you into this package deal to use their foundation model. And this is just also an interesting use case or takeaway that like, all these large providers are all layering in AI, and sometimes they make a lot of sense. Like I think an example was like Salesforce. And then if you're using Salesforce, someone was building a tool. I don't think it was actually Salesforce, but if you're on a call, instead of having to log the call manually, it would just listen to you and then auto update the CRM. That's pretty cool as an agent utility, and that makes a lot of sense complementing the suite. But what I'm trying to sort of dovetail into is implementation of AI on the enterprise stuff is quite interesting. And I think, like, for example, BCG partnered with Anthropic, and then I think Bain partnered with OpenAI. And then so you're seeing the consult. So it'll come down to like, and then you're seeing each of these, like there's a bunch of they're basically like consultants on like the IBM, Dell, or big tech side, and they'll help you with your implementation stack. And I think this is a world I don't understand because I never worked in larger enterprise tech, but all of this stuff will become more important for how the world will change, but no one seems to have any idea on where that's going to go.
No. So this Bain, like the Bain partnership, is that just like that's the model that they're going to push, or that's the solution they're going to push, or it's like that they're going to use it internally for like their own resources? Like, what is the partnership there?
My understanding to it is like, so it says it's an exclusive OpenAI alliance. So I think basically if people want to implement, this is my interpretation of it, it might be wrong, but I think if people want GPT in their enterprise and they don't know how to do it and they need a consultant, they'll use Bain, right? Okay. And then if in comparison also with Anthropic, it's like, oh, if someone wants to use Anthropic, you just punt them to someone else. But McKinsey, for example, uses all the models. So maybe it's not actually just exclusive. So if we go back to like BCG, and maybe Anthropic can use anyone, but BCG gets some sort of an advantage for only pitching Anthropic. So maybe they get some sort of kickback as a referral, So it's actually interesting where like AI adoption could be also tied to the quality of the consultant that's going after people and the talent that they can acquire earlier on.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it's a sales play or like a marketing play. Like we might not necessarily end up with the best solution or the most technically like impressive solution as like the widely adopted one, right? It could be it could be not as good, but it's the one that made the most service agreements with the most partners, and therefore the one that was like pushed on everyone, and then the one that most people learned how to use. And so it becomes very sticky. I do think that they're pretty sticky. Like, I think that like it took a lot for me to start using Gemini just because I was so used to like ChatGPT. For something like, say, like Notion AI, even though it's all embedded all throughout Notion, it's just not as good as like, to me, I don't like it as much as ChatGPT. So I still just copy and paste. Like, that's just like a habit that like I built. So yeah, I think there is a level of that stickiness, and then makes sense why they're going really hard on that.
Yeah, there's definitely a tendency where I'm used to prompting GPT a certain way, and then I'll try out Gemini. I'm like, make this text clean, and then it just does something entirely different. It's not like editing text. It's like trying to figure out what the meaning of the text means. And I'm like, I don't even, like, you know what I mean? You just have to figure out the mechanics of how the model works a bit differently. And then deep research on Gemini, I noticed will be closer to like a 3-5 minute thing. And which isn't bad per se, but it'll give you different outcomes. So, you know, if you do the deep research on GPT, it's going to take like 20 to 30 minutes. You're going to get something really comprehensive. Gemini is maybe a shorter form. So, I mean, it is cool to have different opportunities. I think one thing I'm also noticing with Gemini is people mentioned as higher context windows. So the other day I was trying to upload multiple images, and then it would parse through the images and figure out the correct like metadata associated with it. So I look at an image and like, what are the attributes of them, right? Rather than me sitting down and doing it all. Upload to GPT or Claude, at a certain point, it would run out of context and it'd just be like, I can't do this anymore. Like after, because I'm trying to label a set of like 80 to 100 images, whereas Gemini had larger context windows, so it could actually do it on my behalf. But it's interesting that these small tweaks in the model will actually lead to very different outcomes, and you kind of have to like figure it out yourself. Another thing we could sort of talk about, I think, is AI agents. And I think everyone has a different definition of this. My high level understanding of it is kind of like you plug in different data sources. So there could be Excel sheet, you know, a video, multiple things. You couple it with almost like a prompt that's already pre-made, or just like an ask for a prompt that is coupled with like already pre-baked prompts. And together they'll execute in action. And then what people seem to be excited about with AI agents is, well, I mean, right now it's really good for single tool use. But what the next step of AI agents needs to become, and is more exciting for, is multi-agent interactions, right? So that's like where you can have not just one process automated, but that process can then go to another process that can then go backwards and go to another. And that's where you're representing like multiple things within an organization, like multiple divisions. I think the difficulty there is the communication between the two of them, and then verifying the accuracy of those things, because it's a game of telephone, right? Like one's wrong, then the whole chain of operations is wrong. But it is exciting where, like, I think Anthropic's latest model, or in Claude, Opus 4, could have people coding for as long as 7 hours. And then they coupled reasoning alongside its normal model, so it can actually go in and check the code, and then rather than give you bad code and they can't tell if it's good or bad, and it's more iterative. But I guess the question there is, how would you think of AI agents, and how would you define what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's like, you know, we've had bots for a long time. Since all of a sudden you're calling them AI agents, like, what's the difference? I think what I've seen as the difference is like, bots are very mechanical. Like, you write a script that executes, right, at an interval, and then maybe it could be plugged into all sorts of different things. It could have access to a Twitter account. You could have access to your email. You have bots that can like automate a lot of stuff. I think when the AI agents come in, is like you're using some kind of model to then make it more free form, or make it more like open, like what might happen. That is not just like if-then statements. I mean, going back to like 2016, or like, you know, all the AI startups. Well, like while I was at MIT, like the biggest thing was figuring out, is the code behind this AI startup, is it just a bunch of if-then statements? Because if it's like if-then statements, not really considered AI, right? There's the AI, you had to use some kind of like machine learning, or right, like a deep brain research to actually show that there's some level of thought in it, or like this autonomy in even like I guess like the black box, right? Of like, you don't actually know what's happening when you give it a prompt. You can't really understand like how it's making this decision. You just know that it has the keys with the weights, right? And then it gives back the answer, which then you put that into an agent. I think that one of the issues is that it's been creating all these hallucinations, right? It's like you said, like one hallucinates and then the rest fall. So I've never been able to get agents to not hallucinate, right? Like even like customer service agents or just like coding agents. Like, so I don't know how much trust people are willing to put into these things if they don't realize that like they still hallucinate a lot. And I don't know if the solution to stop hallucination, it could either be like stricter rails before it even gets to the prompt, or it could be this multi-agent like quality assurance check, right? Like your answer, the answer that one agent comes up with is double checked by another agent, just like the coding example. And then maybe that's checked by a third one. And then the three of them give an answer, and you can weed out the hallucinations based off of those responses, right? So that becomes interesting with like the multi-agent workflows. And I agree that like this agent on agent interaction is where a lot of the interesting stuff can happen, because sure, maybe like while I'm online, I can just be the one doing the work myself. But when I'm offline, I can have my agent just going around the internet, just continuously continuously listening and like collecting more information or maybe more news or whatever it needs to be for my work purposes. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think they're still bots. Like people like don't like to think of them as bots, but I mean, yeah, they're just bots. But I think they're smarter bots. And so it does open up all these like new things that we can do with them.
Yeah. Another thing with AI agents, I guess, is the amount of people going after them. So, I mean, I can't help it when you go to a crypto conference or you look at the AI agents there, or you look at a normal AI conference, you have so many companies that have all, they're all building functionally the same AI agent. Make enterprises easily launch AI agents and then couple some prompts in there, enable you to ingest data. And then they'll include like a technical solutions sort of consulting individual that'll help you set it up on your behalf. And the thing is, they're all generating revenue because they're able to have go-to-market motions across the world, and they apply to basically every industry. So it confuses me on like, is this a bubble, right? Like, and I think this is why you see some AI VC investor friends, and they get a bit more pessimistic. But at the same time, you have like YC who's coming out and they're saying this is the best performing cohorts we've ever seen in years. And then they're actually generating revenues. They're able to bootstrap themselves. They don't need funding. Well, the thing I get scared of is within crypto, sometimes you run into a lot of teams like within a vertical. Often there's at least 10 to 20 people going after the same vertical. And I think part of this problem is there are dApp teams for multiple ecosystems, and then each of these L1, L2 ecosystems have like multiple copies of each other. So it's not just 10 to 20 like dexes, it's like hundreds of dexes that are actually out there. In reality, just like the Mag 7 or Fang, there will be consolidation, right? And a lot of them will get cut out. Similar in crypto, similar in AI, that does not mean that the hype was not justified, right? Because people are going after it because there's a big opportunity. But how can we think about, I don't know if any thoughts come to mind where you just think of like AI agents, a lot of people going after the same problem, but different go-to-market motions. And like, is it bear market? Is it bull market? Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? Yeah.
I remember I was at an AI conference in SF, and then I saw a lot of AI, there's all the AI agent stuff there, right? Like happening. And then I was at the MIT Bitcoin Expo, and I was talking to one of my friends who's really plugged into like the AI space. And I was telling him about like all the stuff that like Web3, like all these like crypto AI agents. And he was like, wait, crypto is doing AI agents? Like what? It's like, there's all this like Web3 crypto AI agent stuff. It doesn't even register on the radar of like enterprise AI companies, or of like, as all of these like AI, I guess Web2 startups is what we would call them. But it's not even on their radar compared to like the kind of models that they're building. I think like Web3 AI is still very nascent, and it's a lot of people just making like single agents, or here's an agent with a token, and there's not really like much promise beyond that. And then the software itself is not really that, I don't think it's been really that good. Like I've like used a lot of like the Web3 AI agent tools, and I'm like, oh, this is cool because I'm just starting out and I don't know any AI agent stuff. And then this makes it kind of easy, but you very quickly like leave those tools to then just go like use Anthropic yourself, or use some of these like frameworks that like these startups have built. So I'm not very confident on like what the Web3 promise for AI agents are, except for maybe like payments, because I think that is cool. Like if you have like an agent, I have an agent, you have an agent, they pay each other, they can pay each other like 0.0001 USDC every second, right? That we're like interacting. But I don't think people are really, besides like from virtuals, that is kind of like really focusing on agent to agent commerce. And this is what I saw at the, like a lot of their events is like not really focusing that much on gaming, not so much on the deep AI stuff, but it really going in on agents that will pay other agents to access their models or access their specialized data sets or like use their services, which I think that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing is a bubble, like even in the main enterprise space, because at that AI conference in SF, getting pitched all these AI agents is like, oh, here's an AI agent that has all these buzzwords. And then you like, okay, what does it actually do? It's like, oh, well, you plug it into your Salesforce and it'll reach out to people on your behalf, right? And it's like, really? Like, is that what we're doing? Is just, I'm going to start getting emails that people didn't even write, trying to sell me stuff, you know, like, here's an AI agent that can create newsletters for you. So you don't have to listen to this podcast. It's just an AI generated transcript uploaded to an AI newsletter generator and then send that out to your newsletter list. And it's like, why would I want to put that out there? Like if I didn't even write it. So I guess, I don't know, maybe that's how the future is going to be, is just your agent makes something that my agent then reads, because I'm not going to read it. You're not going to write it. Or I don't know. So like, or maybe that bubble will pop and then we'll kind of take a step back and say, like, okay, what is AI stuff really good for? Like analyzing data, and maybe for like healthcare, right? Like looking through thousands of images of x-rays and identifying things that even like doctors can't like see on the first try, because a doctor is a person that gets very tired from looking at thousands of images. So I think that stuff is really, really cool. And doesn't seem to be a lot of what like AI companies are tackling.
Even so, on the bridge between AI agents and Web3, you're mentioning payments. And I think we've talked about this before, where wallets is the exciting part about crypto, because if you have an AI agent, it's not like you can create a bank account associated with it because it's not a real person. Whereas like you can create a wallet for anyone, and then it's a bit more autonomous in being able to pay other agents. So you can chain them together much more easily in the commerce sort of world.
And I tried using the Venmo API for one of my agents to like pay a couple of people. And then it's like, it's attached to my account, right? Like it's my API key. So it's my money. And then I have to like load the Venmo account. And then there's limits. There's like, you know, obviously it has to be more than a cent. You can't send less than a cent. But even then there's like all these like requirements. And then it's just, yeah, it's like not ideal. It's like crypto just makes so much more sense for this.
Yeah. One thing I sort of think about is like, you know, you see Stripe that's purchased Bridge, which is the, you know, almost like a stable coin as a service where they can sort of like create multiple stable coins and you just kind of pay a monthly fee or whatever. And they've also acquired Privy, which I think, I mean, I know it was a wallet. Do you know more about Privy?
Well, yeah, Privy, you can log in with your socials. So you create a wallet attached to your socials, which is nice for most people, right? Because it's like, I just want to log in with Google or log in with Twitter or whatever, and then just get my keys. You know, people are like, oh, you should have your own private keys. That's the better way to do it. But it's like, I don't think people don't care. Like they just want to be able to access it, which is fine, because it's like, that's how the example is email, right? Like if privacy was something that society really valued at a large scale, we'd all be running our own SMTP servers, right? And like sending our emails directly from our devices to each other. But we don't. We all use Gmail, unless you're like a really big privacy nut, which if you are, that's still open for you. Like you can set up your own keys and have your own seed phrases for these wallets. But I think most people, especially when they're just going to try out an app, like they just want to be able to just log in as quickly as possible. So I think that makes sense. I'm really glad Stripe acquired them, because I remember like talking to Stripe employees in 2017, and they had just delisted Bitcoin and had just taken off all their crypto stuff. And we're like, yeah, this is nothing happening here. There's no volume, no activity. So to go from that to like acquiring two of like the hottest like crypto companies, I think is like, okay, that's a win. We were right.
Yeah. I think if you can connect that to AI agents, that would be pretty cool. Because imagine if you had an AI agent that could, you know, we can already do Twitter bots associated with AI agents. So if you can use that socials to then log in through Privy to create a wallet and then have that agent control the socials and the wallet, that's where you start seeing maybe crypto rails come in. But then it almost seems abstracted in the back end if it's already just like Stripe doing it. Like I don't know where the value creation would happen for crypto aside from more stablecoin usage.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a separate crypto startup involved there. I think it's just a workflow that Stripe. I mean, I think Stripe has all the tools now to set up such a workflow.
Yeah, it's definitely something cool and coming. But you know, I guess moving topics a bit. Another thing that people have been really excited about is the Jony Ive deal. So OpenAI spent $6.5 billion to acquire Jony Ive's, I think, design studio. And I think they're not getting Jony Ive full-time, but he's the guy that basically people are saying designed the early Apple devices. So he basically made the smartphone become a key feature alongside Steve Jobs for our day-to-day lives. So then the idea is like they've been working on some sort of startup in stealth. I think Sam and Jony have been working a number of years. I forget the extent of Sam's involvement there, but they've been working on AI hardware, and people have been thinking. I think recently Brad Lightcap, the COO of OpenAI, said that that device will likely take the form of some sort of globe, right? So you think of that, you hear WorldCoin with Sam Altman's deal where it's like, oh, they had a globe too, but it's supposed to be something that will easily, you can carry on your day-to-day that doesn't come with an actual screen. And I'm pretty excited about that because when I think of sci-fi films, obviously you think of yourself, sitting there in space talking to some AI and it's giving you some feedback. And it's like, okay, send Eric a message. Eric said this. All right, Eric, let's get on a call. You see some hologram of Eric. And then I never have to actually touch a screen. It's just able, because people can actually talk faster than they can type, I think. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, like your initial reactions when you saw the hardware device.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, I always like having like the latest like tech things, right? Like foldable phones or like the AR glasses, and then just finding uses for it. Like I love all sorts of tech, right? I think, yeah, finding a use for it though, I think that's been tricky for these like hardware AI devices. We've had a couple with like the Humane Pin or like the Rabby. It's like little boxes or pins that you like put on, and then it listens to what you say throughout the day, or you can prompt it by pressing and then just say your prompt and then it'll like give you a response. I think the main issues have been that like they're very slow because it has to communicate with the server. So it has to send out the request and then get the response and then get it back. So you either have to like pay for like a data plan or like only use it like when you're connected to Wi-Fi. And then the comparison tests are always like, is it faster to do that? Or is it faster to pull up my phone and then just search the question on my phone, or to just message the person on my phone? And we're not at the point yet where it's faster to just interact with the AI, but I think we'll get there. I think, yeah, like you said, like it's way faster to talk than it is to type. I'm at the point now where a lot of like when I write, I just like speech to text most of it, like, or all of it even, like just here's what I'm feeling, here's my thoughts around this, and then just kind of clean it up afterwards. It's just so much faster. And I think that like a lot of these hardware products are being pushed as like general purpose, which I think that might be a mistake, because I think that like it's very hard to get people to just adopt a new general purpose device. Like here's the Oculus, or like here's a VR headset. It's like, what can it do? It's like, oh, anything. You like, use it for productivity, use it for like talking with your friends, use it for the, and then people just kind of, well, okay, then whatever, I think if it was more specialized, it would make a lot of sense. Like with the smartwatches, right? There were a lot of smartwatches before the Apple Watch, but the one that got like the most traction was the Fitbit, because it was very health focused. And then even with the Apple Watch, like it's still a lot of the features are around health and tracking and sleep and for athletes. So I think if like these AI hardware devices were oriented towards around, say like research, or like being able to, when you talk to ChatGPT, you kind of have to give it all the context. Let's say you're having a fight with a friend, or you want to like explore a city. You have to tell it everything that I'm here in this city, I'm doing this, what can I do? Whereas like if it was with you the whole time, I guess, you have to kind of justify why it's collecting all that data, which I think one good reason would be like, I may not know like what the issue is, but here's like what happened, or you already know what happened. So just you tell me what you think about my day. How did my go? Did I do everything right? Did I do everything productively? Maybe I'm trying to improve in a certain way. So I think that's cool. And then, yeah, I guess with the communicating with other people, yeah, I would like a Jarvis, right? That'd be very cool if you just had a Jarvis with you like all day, just working with you and like listening to what you're saying. I think ChatGPT might start getting there now that they have like the memory installed, because I remember like I asked it like a question, and then I just gave like a very like, what should I do next? And then that was a prompt, just like, what should I do next? And then it just did it based off of like what I've said before that I like to do, or what my goals were before. And it's like, here's what you should do next. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I think it's becoming, yeah, it is getting smarter. It's not just like each prompt is like a fresh slate.
Yeah, I haven't quite figured that. I know there's a memory like function within GPT, but then I think you have to tell it specifically to remember certain things. Otherwise, sometimes it changes it for the window.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most compelling point that you brought up, is like something that can remember the context for everything, so I don't have to continuously re-explain every single context. Like, I think one interesting use case that I've seen someone use GPT for was like they had a health problem, and they were like, I think they basically realized it was tied to their diet, and they had to feed every single thing that they were eating into GPT, and then GPT was actually able to figure out the diagnosis. Versus they go to countless doctors, the doctors all give him like multiple different diagnoses, but they don't have the same amount of ability to look at, you know, all the exact components of all the ingredients that he's eating, and then the implications of how that's making him feel tired or not energetic, right? So, I mean, I would use that. Like, I have eczema issues, for example, with skin. And I'm like, okay, if you can plan out my diet based off everything that I'm eating, tell me when to go to sleep, tell me when to drink water, you know, that's pretty sick. That'd be great.
Yeah, very personal. Like, you know, I got back from the dentist and I had a copy of my x-ray. I uploaded it to ChatGPT and I generated like a deep research report. And I'm like, just tell me everything. I want to know. Like, I always look at it, you know, at the dentist office, and then I ask some questions, they give some answers, and then I go home. But it's like, no, I actually really want to know, like, what's going on? Like, what are these like tendons like going around? Like, what are these nerves? It's almost like as if I'm, you know, training to become a dentist. Like I said, I'm a dentist in training. Tell me everything, right? And then I just spent like an hour just like reading through it. And it was really cool to see like how deep it can get based off of this image, right? And it's like, well, now build off of that, right? Like, I'm trying to improve on it, or I'm trying to, like, what do you recommend? So I think it's, you know, like people always say it doesn't replace a doctor, which I agree. But I also think that like the ability for it to have this level of patience where you can just keep asking it things and then just keep asking it in different ways, that in itself, I think, is game changer for AI. AI for tutoring, AI for learning, right? You have an all-knowing tutor with infinite patience for all your dumb questions. And then on top of that, right, you give it the data that like you wouldn't be able to like recite all of the food for a doctor, and then the doctor would be like, okay, well, here's what I think based off of that. Whereas like with an AI is like it can literally like take everything that you've done or everything that you've eaten and then give you the full report on like that exactly for you, right? Like your diagnosis.
Yeah. I mean, I've had this problem because I've moved around a lot in my life, but then I keep having to switch doctors. And then there are some frustrations associated in Canada, for example, where like I can't even get a family doctor. And then each of them needs to, or like I'm trying to go to see a specialist and my family doctor needs to punt me to a specialist. And each of them are asking for my full medical records, but then they're not like communicating with each other. So then I have to like save down all my medical records somewhere. I don't really understand it, but imagine like my AI could just do that on my behalf, because there's obviously patient confidentiality issues where doctors can't like leak information. But if you sent it all to me and then I have an AI, and then when I go to a doctor, instead of doing like checkups all the time, I could do the checkup, the doctor can give me feedback, and it has all the additional data from the AI, and the AI could undergo ongoing maintenance and like continued like, oh, your doctor said this, you need to do this, like that. I think that's where we get into territory where people are saying, people, you know, they're like, in 10-20 years you'll have like infinite life with life extension.
All the biohacking, right? People really like the biohacking now. I do like the aspect of like, is your data that you take from doctor to doctor and you're just giving them permission to access to view it. I guess the question is like, you know, the data, now you're giving it to the AI model, so that's a different problem. Like, what is the company that you're giving? Are you giving it to OpenAI and then they keep records of it, or how are they deleting it after each use as you get to, I mean, like I was chatting with a couple of people about this, like at Consensus, but it was like, you know how there have been like court cases where people have used Google search history as evidence. It's like, what about your ChatGPT history? Like people are putting into ChatGPT, I'm sure, like more than what they were putting into Google and what they would trust the ChatGPT to like answer for them. So if it does get hacked, or let's say it does get used in court, like that could be evidence, right? So I think that, there's a lot of questions around that. I guess worse if it gets hacked, because if it gets hacked, then somebody could like go through all your chat history. Like, what would they find out about you? or like what could they what are you putting in your social security number? Like, are you like you're giving it all your health? Does it know like all your secrets, like all your things that you've like been embarrassed about and talked to it about, right? Like all your therapy sessions, like whatever. Like people are using it for everything. So I think it does become, those questions come. I have a friend who keeps a sleep journal, and then I told him, or he's like, I'm trying to interpret my dreams. And he was putting it into ChatGPT to like help him interpret his dreams and like kind of over time, like get a sense of what his unconsciousness is thinking. And I'm like, that's really cool. But then he stopped doing it because he's like, I really stopped liking Sam Altman and I really don't trust him with my data. And then this is just so like personal, right? Like, I don't know if I trust that anymore. So I'm like, oh, like we had this really cool use case, but now this privacy thing, which is a very important thing, is kind of stopping us from being able to fully like embrace it.
Yeah, the role of governments within AI is really interesting because some people think, you look at China, they don't have the same privacy concerns. It's just like, let's just funnel all the data into the AI model and then we will get access to the AI model. So like when you bring up potential legal ramifications, to some degree, if you sacrifice the morality behind it, it's like, well, people will be extremely scared to commit crimes. You can't even talk to the model, and then it's like a version of Minority Report, except even worse, where like the AI you're talking to can immediately determine if you're like on the level to committing a crime, which would, reducing crime would be pretty beneficial for society. But, I don't even know what to think about that at that point. Yeah. And I think, on the buy country deals, I think there's also an interesting point where like you're seeing a lot of Middle East money actually flowing into AI. I think Mubadala created MGX, which is an AI focused fund that's like government sponsored essentially. And then I think some other governments are trying for that, but like that might actually have large implications for like if a lot of wealth accrues to AI, those countries may become the forefront in terms of having money in the future, right? Like, there's a lot of countries that we go to that are more natural resource based. And I think those will still be persistent. But when new tech emerges, a lot of them seem to centralize around San Francisco and pockets of other places. Like I think the UK has a couple guys, they got 11 labs, like the AI voice guys, which have been pretty cool. But, there are implications in where jobs might aggregate towards. And then in a world where companies have to compete with each other with AI tools, does that benefit just the war between the US and China? I'm not sure. Another point here is OpenAI, did you see it made a deal with the UAE? So as part of the Stargate project, which was the $500 billion investment, I think, to build some data centers, they were going to go, I think Middle East gave the US some money, and then the US were like, OpenAI will go build a data center in UAE. And then that would power a lot of the compute for OpenAI, but that would bring workers and jobs into the UAE. And then the UAE was able to get ChatGPT Plus, like the $20 per month, free for all of its citizens. So it basically did a bi-country deal of OpenAI, which is kind of insane if you think about it. And I don't know if that pioneers, this case for multiple other countries, but the involvement of government into AI is already starting to happen, and it's becoming politicized. Like I think a lot of this trade war stuff is actually about AI on the back end. But yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on just general government involvement as you were thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more common, right? Like you see in crypto, they're like a big discussion point in crypto is like which governments are adopting it, right? Which governments are buying big and then are adopting stable coins, or even something like El Salvador that just rolled out it's like Bitcoin wallet, right? And it got everyone to start using it, or at least it's trying to get everyone to start using it. I feel like I like it more than startups having it, because I think there have been a lot of issues with startups holding like I trust my data more in the government's hand than like a random startup's hand. I know a lot of people are like anti-government, but look at like 23andMe, right? Like just shut down, or now is bankrupt, and now they have to sell their data, or they sell all their assets, of which is like all the people's like genomic data, right? Like this is something that people have brought up before, like all sorts of cases where you sign up for a startup, you give it your information, and then it's a startup, so it runs out of money, it runs out of VC money, and then it shuts down, and now one of its data is like sold as an asset. You don't know who it's being sold to. So I do think that like, yeah, I think it's good for governments it's cool that governments are like forward thinking and like doing initiatives like this. Yeah, I don't know about like the startups that they choose to work with. So, I mean, that has to be a concern. Like if everyone is forced to use a certain system, then you're forced to adopt like the risk parameters of that system. And maybe it's not something that you want to, like, imagine if they force everyone to use 23andMe to do your genetic testing. And it's like, sure, maybe there'd be a lot of like advantages there, but then hopefully the deal is structured in such a way that 23andMe would not die, right? Or like it has all the funding that it needs to continue doing what it's doing, because I thought it was genuinely good. I would have done it. I just didn't get around to it. But yeah, I mean, now that it's bankrupt, like everyone's data is going to be sold.
Yeah, something to continue to monitor the influence of governments. But I think maybe another point that's also come up is just AI talent wars. It's become almost commonplace where, Meta or some of these other guys will be paying $2 to $100 million packages, or like, I think the term, they say up to 9 figures. And then you actually take a look at the Meta deal with Scale AI, which occurred recently, 49% stake for $15 billion. And you're getting Alexander Wang as part of the Meta in a senior position, but then, the Scale AI is still around. So then they need an interim CEO to be there. So the optics does look like it's a large portion acqui-hire, but I mean, and then when you see some of the articles around it, Zuckerberg is being very excited about Alex and, him having an actual understanding of how the landscape is going to move in the future. So, I mean, when it comes to talent, I mean, one also interesting stat was, OpenAI, the amount of employees going from OpenAI or DeepMind to Anthropic is 8 to 10x the amount that Anthropic would go the other way. And I think that's probably based on the safety first culture that they've done. And also because I think Dario is a bit more research oriented. Like he did research at OpenAI before he spun out to Anthropic. So I imagine a lot of researchers just like that culture. And I think OpenAI, Altman gets some flack, as you sort of mentioned with your friend, and seems to be a bit more of this like sales consumer behemoth, right? Whereas Anthropic is like maybe a bit more focused on research and intellectually interesting to others. But then I think some critiques is like Anthropic has been giving up large packages as well. So it's like, is that truly a benefit where if you're able to acquire all the good talent, does that actually mean you do better? Right. So not sure if you have any couple of friends that made a ton of money, but or have a view on, does it translate, acquiring high talent, does that translate to clear go-to-market in the future and actual revenue?
Yeah, I mean, people have said, yeah, having the best talent is what you definitely want to have the best talent, right? Like, but I think, what about the management structures there? I guess, does that include the best managers? Because if you have like all this like bright talent working for you, but you're not able to like efficiently capitalize on it, then I mean, you just kind of end up in a situation where you just produce a lot of stuff, but then as soon as like there's a down, then all the projects get cut and then all the layoffs happen, right? So I guess if that talent is directed in the right direction, or like if it's focused and then put towards like the key apps that need to be made, because I know, like, I mean, over the decades, like a lot of talent has just been wasted on projects that like have just started and then were shut down because the strategic direction of the company changes, right? And it's like, well, why didn't you like determine that beforehand, right? I mean, Microsoft is always sunsetting projects, Google is always sunsetting projects. So, and you had the talent, right? Like there was very talented people, engineers and everything, but I think there also needs to be the level of like understanding of the market or the product market fit, right?
Yeah, and maybe this is where like Sam Altman's YC background is beneficial, where you're just running a bunch of these internal things, but then it's not just a group of scientists that are just doing things for fun because it's interesting to move the science space forward, but it needs to move towards something with product market fit. So it is kind of interesting where you'll see Anthropic versus OpenAI. Is it the researchers heavier that are going to win, or is it like the YC model, which might win? And I think another thing to consider is like, I think Anthropic has higher retention rate of employees at closer to 87%. I think OpenAI is lower at 67%. But then, part of it could be the brand name of OpenAI. And then if you're thrown into some YC sort of model, it's like, well, I could just do this myself. Why am I like letting this accrue to OpenAI? But
yeah, I mean, how many people are spinning out companies? Because I feel like I've definitely seen like startups that are like OpenAI, like we're OpenAI, so we're building this. So yeah, it could just be the culture there that people are they're on that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm working here to leave here to then go do my own thing.
Yeah, totally. Well, we've talked a lot about it today. I think we're closer to the 1 hour mark. Wanted to probably just end it there. thanks everyone for taking the time to obviously tune in. And if you guys are interested in more AI stuff, Eric and I are happy to come back. Or any last words, Eric?
No, I think that's going to be an AI future. I'm glad that there's all these tools for people to use, especially like the non-code tools. Even though I code, I think it's definitely like NFTs really took off after people can make them without knowing how to code. And then, now there's the whole thing with the vibe coding, which I think has this whole host of issues, but it is cool to see what people make with it. And I think that, we're going to see more and more stuff like that. I want to see more on the analytics side, more on the health side, which we'd have to figure out all the privacy stuff. But I think that's like the biggest potential for AI is we always talk about like making health more personalized. And I think this is a tool that's going to make it more personalized.
Yeah. Something we're still tracking and trying to see if Nibiru can fit in some sort of AI angle. But in the interim, we're just researching and leveraging AI tools in our own workflow. So that's the way it is. All right. Thanks, everyone.